What's up guys, welcome back to the shop. In today's video I'm going to be making a ball bearing Damascus but with no powder. So it's going to be a little different, but it should give us a really cool end result. And as always, it's important to clean your materials thoroughly to make sure you get a best weld as possible. And these ball bearings do come with a thin layer of oil, so it's important to degrease them. This construction is slightly different because it doesn't have any powder in it. So I have a lot more voids inside of the canister than I normally would. And with that welded up, I'm moving over to my 52100. I'm cleaning up the material so I can stack it and make one big billet that I will draw down to the appropriate size for the other billet that I'm working with. Here I'm starting my initial press, which I always do top to bottom and on both sides. That way I can consolidate everything inside of the billet as best as I can. Then I move over to squaring the billet back up. That way it fits in my squaring dies and I can give it even pressure all the way around. As I begin pressing it here, the lid already starts to release from the can, and you can start seeing some ball bearings falling out where the ends didn't weld as nice as I would have liked, but overall it's still got a good weld. And here I'm just hitting the corners, trying to release the billet from the inside, trying to loosen it up so I can pull it out with my tongs. It is a little tedious to get it out like this, but it is the quickest and cleanest way to get the billet out. Now that I got my other billet up to heat, I'm going to start pressing it and forge welding it together and make one solid block. Here you can see the separate ball bearings on the ends, and I'm trying to push them back together, try to get the center mass as tight as possible. That way I have no cracks on the inside. And I'll be going back and forth between the two billets to get them to the same dimensions. Here are the two pieces out of the forge. They've already cooled down. I'm not feeling too confident about this guy, and that's mainly because I didn't take into account, normally when I do a canister, it has steel powder in it. So I have to reduce it by about 1/3 to get a nice solid weld. This has a lot more empty space, a lot more air than a canister with steel powder. Therefore, I probably need to reduce it by even more, probably half or even 2/3 to get a nice solid weld. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these ends so that they don't create any problems. I'm not going to grind it. I'm just going to cut the ends, and I'm actually going to put it in muriatic acid so it'll start, burning away at cleaning up the steel. And then I'm going to reforge it again and thin it down even more. Probably compress it this way and try to get just a block of steel. Then once I feel comfortable with that, I can resize this for this guy so I can restack it the way I originally planned to. And hopefully we get something good. If not, I'll just forge this out into whatever I can, and I can put this aside and use it in a future project. This is just a block of 52100, so it works for anything. So I cut it, and it's actually looking pretty promising. The outside doesn't look too promising, but the inside does. As I keep forging this guy, it keeps trying to bow on me, which really gets me thinking I need to update my dies and get a wider array of dies so that I can easily flatten out these billets and keep them nice and straight. At this point, the little light bulb turned on, and I realized I have squaring dies, so I might as well just square them off with the same dies to get them to the same dimensions. Here are my 3 pieces cut and ready to stack. I ended up having to grind the center one, which is the ball bearings, a lot more than what I had wanted, so it ended up being a lot thinner than the other pieces. So that's going to affect my pattern a little bit at the end, but trial and error. Here everything seems to be going smoothly, but the end starts opening up. In hindsight, I should have welded the billet a lot better, but I didn't want to get a lot of mild steel in from the welding, so I just gave it a couple of spot welds. But now I know for the future reference, just weld all the way around it. I have plenty of material anyways. And here I'm just hammering it out, trying to see if I can get a better forge weld by hand. But unfortunately, not even all the flux in the world can save this billet, as it, no matter how much I press it, it keeps splitting. Alright guys, so I ran into some difficulties forging this. For a moment, I thought I was forge welded pretty nicely, but then it started peeling. This layer right here just would not stick, and I'm not sure why that was, but it just wouldn't. So yeah, I have nothing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it probably a little bit before half, because it seemed like this part was the first probably like 30 to 40% was properly welded, and then the rest wasn't. And I'm pretty sure these stress fractures have something to do with it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it probably like around there. Probably somewhere around here. I'm gonna cut it on the bandsaw and check if it's properly welded. The line is ugly because I'm using my left hand. I am not left-handed. So I'm probably gonna cut it around there on the bandsaw. Then I'm gonna clean this up, make sure it's properly forge welded, and I'm gonna continue with this, and I'll probably rip these apart, clean them up better, and see if I can make something with them. If not, these two are definitely salvageable. I don't know about this guy, but I might make something cool with it later. I don't know. But if this is welded, we're gonna just continue with this piece and make a smaller knife out of it. Should be pretty cool. And here I'm going to spray it down with some WD-40 to help protect the steel from oxidization while it's in the forge. It works the same way as kerosene. And now that I am out of the forge and it's nice and hot, I'm going to clean it off, and I'm going to forge it by hand, try to get it as solid as possible before I go to pressing it with the hydraulic press. Now that it feels nice and solid, I'm going to hydraulic press. I'm going to slowly draw it out. I'm only going to be using the squaring dies. That way I'm putting the least amount of pressure on it while still forging it out nice and evenly. For the pattern I'm going for, I have to press it on the faces, and that causes a lot of stress on the actual forge weld, so I have to be careful and go slowly. And now that it's forged out, I'm going to hit it with my diamond wheel. This diamond wheel I got at Home Depot, and it's worked great. I've had it for months now, and it works really well with getting all the hard scale off, prepping it up for cleaning it on the belt sander. Alright guys, so here is the billet. I've cleaned it up and I cut off the edges because the edges were ugly. And I don't know if you can see, but that's pretty good weld between the three pieces that are welded together. And it's looking pretty good. It's looking very promising. So before I go on to the next part, which I'll explain here shortly, I'm going to put it in acid and I'm going to go on ahead and etch it to see how it's looking on the inside. And that way I get a reference of roughly what I'm going to do with it. Alright, so we do have a pretty nice core in there. It's a lot thinner than what I originally wanted, but I had to thin it out whenever I was removing cracks and cleaning it up. So I'll definitely take that into consideration on the next attempt. But it's looking pretty good. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to notch out probably an inch apart. Notch out almost like a lantern pattern where you do back and forth. And that's going to start making, once I forge it flat again, this is going to start making this pattern wave through. So that's the next part I'm going to do. This step is crucial for getting the pattern that I'm looking for. Once I press it back down, it's going to give it that wave that I'm looking for in the center. I don't have the best track record with forging these lips back together. I have done it before with success, but it's always a pain to get them to forge weld correctly, and here I have a lot more trouble because of the bearings that are in the center piece of the steel that just will not stick together. And after giving up on forge welding the tip together, I start resquaring my billet and getting those waves back into a straight line, which will give us that pattern we're looking for. And once more, rinse and repeat. Time to clean it up and etch it. Alright guys, so we have the pattern going through the blade. It's looking pretty cool. You can kind of see the different little cracks from the bearings in there. You won't be able to tell really until I harden it. But you can see the faint shadow of it. It's looking pretty cool. I tried to forge weld the tip in there, but it was not grabbing for the life of me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it and just curve it out whenever I force the tip of the blade. And that is what it is. I don't know why it didn't weld, but it's some very difficult material to weld. The ball bearings to get to weld back together, they just don't want to. But overall, it's coming out pretty promising. Not exactly what I was hoping for at the beginning, but I wanted a thicker centerpiece, but I ended up thinning it out a little bit more than what I would have wanted because of just the forging process. But it is what it is. Pretty good proof of concept. So be sure to check out the next build where I make a pretty cool knife out of this. Not sure what I'm going to make yet, but I sure will make something. And that's it for now, guys. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.